I'd like to welcome you to Democrats Abroad 19th Kafeneion. It's a very serendipitous and poetic nod to today's Juneteenth celebration in the US. We didn't plan that, but it's nice. It's hard to process that since the first one I organized, we have come so far and had so many distinguished speakers and rich engagement. And many from our ExCom are present, and they all helped to bring this program to you. So I'd like you to wave your hands to be recognized. And for all of you accompanying us on this journey, thank you for your continued interest and support. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I am Sarah Jane, Vice Chair of DAGR, and Kafeneion is our virtual discussion and event space. Along with other DAGR events, it serves as a platform for education and ultimately to get out the vote. And specifically, Kafeneion is an initiative designed for community engagement while addressing significant topics of concern to American voters. So we like to foster a sense of solidarity among attendees, and we welcome free, constructive discussion. I remind you to keep your microphones muted, but please feel free to put any questions in the chat or raise your hand using the hand up function so that we can call on you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gina Billy, who is our DAGR member at large. She is in Crete, and she is going to be introducing tonight's program and moderating our discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah Jane. Thank you really for coming up with the idea of Kafeneion in the first place during the pandemic, and how you brought it along is amazing, and I'm thrilled to be part of the team. But what I'm really, really excited about is seeing my friend and former colleague, Renè Sylar, sitting in her studio in Georgia and joining us here in Greece this evening. I don't really know where to start to introduce you to Renè. And if I told you everything she's done in her whole life, we'd be here until tomorrow, and she wouldn't get a chance to talk. So I'll try to be brief and just go over some of the highlights. Renè studied psychology. She graduated with her degree from the University of California in Sacramento, I believe. And the same year, she got her first start in following her dream in TV news in Reno, Nevada, where she was hired as a reporter, but was quickly, her talent was scouted and she moved up to anchoring weekend news. And a couple of years later, she relocated to Birmingham, Alabama, which is like everybody's favorite spot to go work. But I was already working at the NBC affiliate when Renè arrived. And one of the things I remember, which I'll just share with you openly, is everybody in the newsroom, oh, this is the new Black woman they've hired to be the weekend anchor. And I was like, no, this is the new woman they've hired. And it was clear in Birmingham, a Black woman co-anchor for the weekend has left. So it's obvious that this demographic is going to be covered. And we're grateful, because there was a time in Birmingham, Alabama, and elsewhere where a Black person, and especially not a Black woman, would not have been allowed to do this job. Well, I think, Renè, our desks were actually next to each other at some point. I vaguely remember, and still with the old typewriters, just a whole different age. And by the time Renè joined, though, I was already getting disillusioned with TV news. And we got a new boss whom I couldn't get along with, but you stuck it out. And I quit and moved to New York, and 4 years later on to Europe. But Renè stuck it out in Birmingham another year and then moved on to much bigger markets, first in Dallas, where I think you were about 10 years in Dallas, anchoring first the morning and noon news, and then the big time evening news. And then she got the call to move up to the network and became the first Black woman in the United States, I believe, to co-host a morning news show, the early show for CBS. And I didn't even know all of this, Renè, because I'm busy over here with my new life in Europe and not paying much attention to what's going on back in the States. Because when I left it, Bill Clinton was president, just figure things are in good hands before Monica. But after leaving CBS in not a nice way, Renè didn't give up, but she's kept on and done so many amazing things afterwards, including writing this book called Good Enough Mother, which I recommend to all parents. and hosting, guest appearing on numerous shows. And about a year ago, I think you went back to work full time with Tyler Media, where she's now using all of the skills she developed throughout her, meanwhile, three into the fourth decade of being a woman in this business, in this field, as a veteran broadcaster, media all-rounder, author, and just totally great person. And I'm delighted that you're here with us this evening, Renee, and just going to turn it over to you to share about your journey, and especially where the US is right now, your insights on that, and talking about Juneteenth with us. Thank you so much for doing this. And please welcome Renè Sylar.
Oh, well, thank you, Gina, and everybody. I'm really happy to be here with you. I guess I should preface this by saying this is my perspective as a Black woman in this country right now, and growing up as a Black woman. And it's just, we're in such an odd space right now. And I would actually be lying if I didn't say that it's a little unnerving being a Black woman. I have I was going to say young children, but they're adults now. My son is 26 and my daughter's going to be 28. And so I don't fear so much for myself, but I do fear for the world that we are leaving them. And with every right that gets rolled back, that fear becomes more germane and realized. My kids are in New York, so I'm grateful for that. But it's this low level. This is what we were talking about, kind of offline for a second, that I feel like for me and a lot of people like me, there's this low level stress that we're constantly under because there's just so much unknown, and the unknown is really, really terrifying. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. First, I want to say happy Juneteenth, everybody. And I want to tell you, though, that we're meeting on Juneteenth. I did not find out about Juneteenth until I moved to my television job in Texas. That means that I went all the way through my school years, all the way through college, all the way through 2 TV jobs, including one in a southern state, Birmingham, and didn't know about Juneteenth. And I found out about it because everybody was talking about it in Texas, because that's where, it was founded, in Galveston. And so I think that right there speaks volumes about who thought it was important, who didn't think it was important. Everybody knew about it in Texas, but I had never heard about it outside of when I had gotten to Texas and then went to go cover it. I wanted to talk to you guys, and I think Gina and I came up with the idea of the name of the conversation was A Black Woman Told Me, and it's for 2 reasons. One, I started a podcast. I'm in the post-production phase of a podcast now. And the second thing is because being a Black woman carries with it, a unique perspective, just as being, a white man or a white woman, we come with our various perspectives. And I did this podcast for that, but also because I was meeting all of these really dynamic Black women who were getting bounced out of corporate America for whatever reason. And so I decided I wanted to do this podcast mostly as a roadmap for people like my daughter. I wanted them to be able to say, oh, well, this happened to so-and-so, and here's how she handled it. So really, that was part of the genesis of A Black Woman Told Me, and that'll be out later this year. I do believe that we are in one of the most perilous times of our lives as a country, as Americans, as minorities. It all feels very perilous is the only word that really comes to mind. It feels scary and like as we watch these rights get rolled back, it's if you're not careful, you can really be paralyzed from the fear. That's why I'm glad to be here with you guys and hear what you all are doing. Because sometimes, frankly, here it feels so overwhelming. I know people say, oh, well, just turn off the news, it'll be fine. Turning off the news does not make me any less Black. And it doesn't make me any less a woman. Turning off the news just means I don't know what's happening. It doesn't change anything. So while sometimes, like yesterday, I didn't have the news on, but I'm still very interested in how things are covered and how what the messaging is that's getting out and what we really need to be doing at this particular juncture. I've been in TV news for a long time, like Gina was saying. And I would say in the last probably 10 years, I have seen just such a shift in news and information. Prior to, like the internet, the way we use it now, we had cable, and even cable was really different from broadcast. And those are because what I'm describing to you is a fragmentation of news and information. When you have broadcast television who makes its money on advertisements, it is also run by, the FCC. You can't run afoul of the FCC or you lose your license. Cable introduced more of a fragmentation of the audience. So now, instead of a pie that was in three pieces, now it's in, I don't know, whatever cable started with, 30. And now it's, on my cable, 900, 1,000? That's not even taking into account what we can see and what we do see online, where people are making their own networks online. So as a journalist, and I still maintain a journalist kind of sensibility in that I take in information the way a journalist does. I have a critical eye. I always want to know who says that? If it looks too incendiary, I'm always like, who's behind this piece of this post or what have you? Because I do think the danger is this just rage baiting. This, people are putting out things that have no bearing in fact, but they know that they will get people up and running. And I think right now everybody's so angry. And that's really what I see on the other side, the side that is supporting taking away our rights and, instilling Christianity in schools and taking away Black history, taking it out of schools, is this absolute rage to conform to their way of thinking. And I think that's dangerous. And I just think to myself, I've never felt that way. Why would what I believe matter to somebody? I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but why would I be trying to make somebody believe as I do if their lives are different? And so that is really confounding and troubling to me, is this ire that seems to be bubbling up and really the engine behind what's driving a lot of the stuff that we see. So I don't know, how much, is anybody here on Twitter? Does anybody spend any time on Twitter? Okay. Well then, Barbara, what a cesspool it is. And it wasn't like that in the early days of Twitter, in the early days of social media. I thought there was nothing better. But then in the last couple of years, Twitter was sold to Elon Musk. And prior to him, you used to be able to have a verified blue check, which meant that what you said you had some authority behind you. Police departments had them. Government agencies had them behind them. People of some note had a blue check mark, which meant the information was solid. And then he took all that away and then made people pay for him. So now you don't really know who, if this is a real person, if this is somebody who's actually, sending out true and meaningful news and information, or is this agenda driven or whatever. And, you look now at who's got the blue checks on Twitter, and it really is, it just is just like a cesspool now. And it's a lot of agenda driven, hate based, like just really took what I thought was a good thing and made it not so good. I talked about we're meeting on Juneteenth. Did you know that Juneteenth, there are 10 states that don't recognize Juneteenth? And those are like mostly Southern states. In those Southern states, however, they do recognize between 1 and 3 holidays that celebrate the Confederacy. That's the kind of stuff we're up against. So we're in Alabama and Mississippi, you can celebrate Robert E. Lee Day, and there's, a couple of others, Jefferson Davis. But they won't tell you about the accomplishments, but they're working hard to take away literature that talks about the accomplishments of African Americans. And so that's really part of that. When I think about these things, it all feels so big and overwhelming and so multifaceted. That's one attack. Then we have the attack on the judiciary. What's happening in Florida with Aileen Cannon is like, it's shocking. What's happening at SCOTUS is what I just feel very helpless. I don't know how you guys feel, but for me, as the mother of a 28-year-old woman and a 26-year-old son, watching them potentially have fewer rights than I had it's just too much. So anyway, that's kind of where I am right now. What I think our biggest threats are, I think threefold. I think we really need to be aware of cybersecurity and cybersecurity threats. And the way those things impact newsrooms is that, a cybersecurity threat, and they're becoming so sophisticated, they'll target a newsroom. And while that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is, because it slows down fact-finding. It slows down your ability to look back at articles and give things their proper perspective if you can't go back because your systems are down. It can really cripple that. And then, of course, it delays editing, which then, of course, creates a void. And then what happens when there's a void? All kinds of information flows into the void. And it's not necessarily true or scouted or whatever, but we're so 24/7 now with these things. It's like we're hungry for some of that. And so somebody puts something out there, social media picks it up with no fact checking, no nothing. And it's off to the races. And so those things, as a journalist, I don't know how you feel, Gina, about it, but those things, as I watched where we were going with that, became very troubling and nerve-wracking to me. The fact that people would abdicate, I see a lot of this, abdicate their responsibility to search for the truth and just be spoon-fed something that came across on Instagram, or their friend said it, or something like that, is really shocking to me. That nobody's putting their critical thinking hat on Because if it's so outrageous, there should be something in us that goes, oh, that's crazy. But the reason it's not there is because we've become so siloed. We're in our information silos, and it's less about finding the truth as much as it is confirmation bias. So I'm going to, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. What do I watch Fox News? No, but I do watch MSNBC, right? And when somebody's off, I watch it so much. When somebody's off, I'm like, where's Nicole? Why is she not there? Like, and so I'm guilty of it too. But I do try, even on our side, I do at least look at, there's a chart that comes out every year. I'll send it to you, Gina, and you can pass it along. It's by Fontis Media, and they actually have like a bell curve that shows where your source of news is on this curve. So in the middle, they put all the ones that are, playing things pretty much right down the middle. And then they have the left, and then they have the right. And so mine is kind of left, but up high. So it's not so far left, but it is left. And so, yeah, but back to the ransomware or cybersecurity threats are really, really important and impactful. And so we have to take that very seriously. News organizations have to take that seriously. What, we see as a result of that is misinformation and disinformation. And the difference is that misinformation is something that might get shared, perhaps not intentionally, but it's harmful nonetheless. Like that's like a careless thing, and someone just passed it along without checking. But disinformation is different. That's an actual effort to deceive. You've heard of deep fakes. Does everybody know what a deep fake is? Okay. Selective editing. We saw that the other day with Joe Biden at the American Cemetery in Paris, where he was turned around and he was talking to the gentleman who was rolling up his chute. But that piece got clipped out, and it was made to look like he was out of it. That stuff, that's disinformation. That's disinformation. I think all of us have to look at something like that and immediately think, come on now. You have to go a step beyond, and you'll see it on Twitter. People will be like, oh my God, look, he was looking in the opposite direction, and without any kind of context. And that's really where I feel like the media, and this is a hard thing to say, but we are still so caught up in the way we used to be. The two sides, we're presenting two sides, this is how the one side, this, that, and no one is calling out what is clearly wrong. What is clearly wrong. For me personally, it's rankles me, because I know a lot of journalists, and I know, Gina, you and I both came up in the trenches, and we were not agenda driven. We were just trying to make the deadline. And so this idea that, oh, the big media and mainstream media, which I can't even call it mainstream media anymore. It's more like legacy media. But this idea that they're somehow working in concert with one or the other is just absurd to me. So those things, the cyber attacks, the misinformation and disinformation, those things together add up to an erosion of trust in our systems. And that's where I feel like we are we're really tipping into. That's been happening over the past several years, but it feels like it just got really sped up. And the misinformation and disinformation is so, it's just so, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I know this is a big ask for you guys because you're not journalists, but I'm asking that we all, particularly right now at this very critical juncture, start thinking like journalists, start asking questions, recognize when you're being baited, rage baited, ask, what is the source of this? Search. Now you can, we've never had more information right at our fingertips. And yet people are just walking around like, oh, that's too much work. And they read the headlines and they share and with no idea, no context. And so, excuse me, that's part of also what I think is our job, is to provide some context. What does this mean? What does Clarence Thomas and Harlan Crow, what does all that mean for my daughter, for your daughters, for your nieces and nephews? What does it mean if Donald Trump gets to put 2 more justices on the court? What? I know, I can't, Jan, I can't even allow myself to go there because it's so dark and so frightening. So we have to be vigilant about the information that we take in, what we put out, and how we can add context to that. Erosion of trust. Oh, so now I just want to talk to you because I really would love for this to be more of a Q&A instead of me just up here yammering on. But I have a couple of things that I think we should all be really, really doing, and this is important. Fact check. You got to fact check your information. It's got to come from authoritative and reputable sources. So that's the one thing I see on that other side is they're like, oh yeah, but who says that they're reputable? Because they have history. They have a long history of being, truth tellers in the dark. Have they made mistakes? Of course, but by and large, they have a track record. We got to be wary of sensationalist, emotionally charged, extremely partisan content, even on our side. Even on our side, I am careful about sharing stuff like that because from our side, because I feel like I don't want anything to detract from when I do say something important. I don't want to flood the zone with a whole bunch of nonsense so that when I actually do say something important, people have turned it off because, oh, it's just Renè spouting off again. So I am pretty careful about the stuff that I share. Does anybody know about Snopes? Have you heard of Snopes.com? Okay. Snopes.com is, fact check your stuff. If it's, check the date. Was this something that just popped up again in 2024, but really a story that happened in 2021? Because that's how the algorithm works. When something starts getting liked a lot, bubbles right on up to the top. And then we are resharing it again. And people are like, that happened 4 years ago. Check the sources. I always look at sources and stats. Be skeptical of anonymous and unsubstantiated claims. I'm not going to post anything anonymous. If you can't put your name to it, how truthful can it really be? Examine evidence and data objectively. I know that we have a lot at stake. We have a lot to lose, but we also need to maintain an air of objectivity. Very, very critical for us there. Cross-reference. This goes back to the reputable sources. When we would put a story on the air, it wasn't enough to have it sourced by one person. It needed to be source checked. Like the other day when the Wall Street Journal did the thing on Kevin McCarthy's book, and didn't ask anybody else, used Kevin McCarthy only as the source. The Wall Street Journal, of course, Murdoch owned, but I mean, you'd think given that they'd lost all this money on the, not Smartmatic, but the other one, Dominion lawsuit, they might be a little more careful about that, but okay. The support and fund credible journalism. This is really big because the industry, as we've said, is changing. So what's really happening right now is a dearth of money means fewer people, less time. We have now more time to fill, fewer people to fill it. And so there's a lot of people who don't have time to do that a lot of people in traditional or legacy media that don't have time to do all of that digging that's really required. When you have to do a live shot, for 4 times a day, and then you also have to turn a package. Well, when are you actually going to be calling and making appointments and doing interviews and all that stuff? When does that happen? So that's a real issue as well. Encourage political leaders, parties, and campaigns to renounce and counter disinformation from their own sides. Of course, we know that. But lastly, and just to wrap this up, the best defense is to actively consume information critically, including our stuff. We want it to be fact-based. We want it to be real. We're passionate and we can be emotional, but we really have to, this is about the facts. And we have to just keep that in mind and not get rage baited and that sort of thing. Okay. So, oh my goodness, look, it looks like questions. Hang on. Let me put on my glasses, or Gina, do you want to,
Well, I'll call on everybody to ask their questions.
Okay,
wonderful. I think that's nice. But Renee, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much. I've got about 1 million questions myself, but first of all, just again, thank you. And I'll open up the floor now to talk with Renee about whatever you want.